yafe hayom, Shabbat shalom, ma yafe hayom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom.
Page 126, Yedid Nefesh.
Yedid nefesh afarachamon, Yedid nefesh afarachamon, ma shachavtecha al ratzonecha, ma shachavtecha, ya lai 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 lai,
Page 128, Dodi Li, my beloved is mine.
And we'll just sing the first line like a nigun 3 or 4 times. Dodi li ve'ani lo haroe b'shoshanim, Dodi li, Dodi li ve'ani lo haroe b'shoshanim, Dodi li, Dodi li ve'ani lo haroe b'shoshanim, Dodi li.
On the facing page, we enter the sanctuary to welcome Shabbat. Within these walls, we sit surrounded by numberless generations. Our ancestors built the synagogue as a visible sign of God's presence in the midst. Throughout our long history and our endless wanderings, it has endured, a beacon of truth, love, and justice for all humanity. Its presence guided our ancestors to lives of righteousness, holding up to them a vision of their truest selves. Now we, in our turn, come into this sanctuary to affirm the sacredness of our lives. May we enter this place in peace. May holiness wrap around us as we cross its threshold. Weariness, doubt, the flaws within our human hearts, the harshness of the weak. Let these drop away at the door. In the brightness of Shabbat, let peace settle upon us as we lift our hearts in prayer. Page 131, Psalm 96, Shiru Ladonai.
Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basru miyom leyom Yeshuato, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. שירו לאדוני, שירו שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ. שירו לאדוני, שירו שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ. שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו.
Page 138, the most beautiful of Songs of Psalms, page 138, Lecha Dodi.
Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. La la lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamua v'zachor b'dibur echad, ishmiyanu elam yuchad, Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. L'Shem tiferet b'litil la 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 la. Lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nilcha, ki makor haberacha, merosh mekedom nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshava la 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 la. Lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, hitoreri, ki va'orach kumi ori, 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 yeshir daveri, kevod Adonai al yarich nigla la 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 la. Lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela.
We rise.
Ohi v'shalom ateret bala, gam besimcha uv'tzola, toch emunai am segula, boi chala, boi chala. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekat lekat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela.
And so as we have welcomed Shabbat with Lecha Dodi, Judith, I'd like to invite you to light Shabbat candles in honor of your grandmother, in honor of her memory, in honor of Katie Mendelssohn. And please feel free to share a few words if you wish before you light candles.
I had a very loving and lovely relationship with both my grandparents, Katie and Abraham Mendelssohn. From when I was a small child to when I grew up. My grandfather died when I was 16 years old, but my grandmother lived to to watch Ken and me get married, and also was able to get to know her two great-grandsons, Peter and Kevin, which was lovely. So when Temple David came into being, she became a member of Temple David, and every Shabbat morning she would walk from Lawley Crescent, where she lived, round to Temple David and attended Shabbat morning services at Temple David. When my grandmother died, I was very, very sad because I was very close with my grandmother. And even today, when I go to Mount Lawley, I walk along Lawley Crescent, where my grandmother used to live, and the house is still standing as it was when she lived there. And I look into the house from the street, and I think to myself of all the beautiful, lovely, wonderful memories I've had with my beautiful grandmother.
Beautiful.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotov, v'tzivanu lahadlik neshel Shabbat.
Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
We just take a moment to wish one another Shabbat Shalom. So as we are seated, we continue with Shalom Aleichem on page 142.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachan LaShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachuni LeShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zetom LaShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Let us rise for the Chatzi Kaddish on the next page.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועלמא דיברה חירותי וימלך מלכותי, וחייכון וביומכון וברכי לכל בית ישראל. בגלה בגלה ובזמן חריף ואמרו אמן. ויתפע ויתרומן ויתנשא, ויתוודע ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי וקודשם ויתברך, לילה מכל בחטא ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן במה וימחוק, אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך,
On page 148, the blessing that brings about the evening, the Ma'ariv Aravim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, b'chokhmah poteach sharim, uvidbuna meshane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umsader et hakochavim, v'mishmerotehem barakia kirtono. Borei yom v'layla, goleh or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, uma'avir yom u'mevi layla, umavdil bein yom u'bein layla, Adonai tzavaot shemo. El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim.
Ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, hukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta, Al kain Adonai, Eloheinu b'shachbeinu, ufkumeinu nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei toratacha, uv'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed, ki hem hayenu, v'orach yameinu, uvahem nege yomam balayla, ve'aftra al tasir mimeinu l'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, ohef amo Yisrael, ohef amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Baruch Shem kevod malchuto leolam vaed.
You may be seated. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושינתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. On page 157, standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together.
Lai 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 la 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 mi kamocha bailim Adonai mi kamocha neda bakodesh Nora tehilot o sefel Nora tehilot o sefel malchutecha ra'u banecha בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים זה אלי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. I'm not sure when last we had the opportunity to read the meditational reading on the facing page, Where Will I Find You? But I find it extraordinary in many ways, and I invite you to share it with me before we share in singing and then the Chatima of Hashkivenu. Where will I find you, if not in the shells of the heart, in the cupboards of my bones, on the spiraling stairways of my fingertips? Where will I find you, if not in the light that gathers us each morning in the golden net, or in the light of the Sabbath candles, sturdy as the columns of your house? Each day I am called to recreate your house with everything at my disposal, a never-ending stairway of righteousness, cupboards full of good deeds, shelf upon shelf of loving kindness. Hashkivenu on page 160.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai ufros sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, Eternal One, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. V'shamru on page 162.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וכי ששת ימים, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפוש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
Neil and I kept looking at you to see when you were going to clap.
Need to work on the claps.
So that's what
Yes.
that's what we were doing. He was watching you, and then I was watching him, watching you, and we were just trying to figure out when do we clap. And then you did the hand on the beamer, and we were all confused.
Yes, we need to work on the claps.
So there's a particular time. Unlike me, who just like is
Yes.
unlike whenever, right? Because yes,
Have fun.
that's fine. Let us rise for the Amidah on page 164, and we'll share the first three blessings out loud together, then continue with the prayers of our hearts, or the words of the page silently, and coming together with Oseh Shalom, page 180. But I do invite you that once you have finished your prayers, whether on the page or on your hearts, please do have a seat, or if you find that standing is tiresome or onerous for you, to also please be seated. Page 164.
Adonai sefatai tifta ufi agite la terra. Adonai sefatai tifta ufi agite la terra. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor HaNorah, Ha'el Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei HaKol, V'Zofei Chazdei Avot B'Mot, U'Mevi Gula Lifnei B'Nechem, L'man Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Hosea U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Asher Adonai, Magen Avraham, Pesach Tzara. Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, B'chayei HaKol Ata Rav Le'Hoshia, Mashif HaRuach U'Murit HaGeshem, Matziach HaShemesh U'Murit HaTzal, Mechakel Chayim B'Chesed, Mechayei HaKol B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, Umati Asurim, Umchayehem Emunato, Lishonei Afar, Michamo Chaval Gehurot, Umidom Elach,
b'chol yom yemhalu pasela. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. We continue with the prayers of our hearts.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. יאללה לי לי לי, יאללה לי לי לי, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la la la, yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו amen.
May God bring peace to the entire world, and we say,
Amen.
Amen. So I was reminded by Rabbi David Wolpe of Sinai Temple of two stories that I want to share with you, and I'll relate it to this week's Torah portion. He shared the stories in relation to a different Torah portion, but either way, sometimes stories you can relate to any Torah portion, can one not? The stories I'd actually heard at different times relating to different Torah portions, and I think they must do the rabbinic rounds of telling stories, and this will probably be not the first or the last that you'll hear these stories, or probably from me. So now that I've been talking about telling you about telling the stories, maybe I should actually tell you the stories. And Judith is like, just get on with it. And I won't tell you which Judith is thinking that. What's that? You're both too kind to think that. So the Pope was planning a trip and planned a trip to Israel. And when he got there, he was in Tel Aviv and he needed to, of course, get to Jerusalem. Are you familiar with the story? Or any iteration of the story? Not so far. Oh, awesome. A fresh audience. Fresh congregation. And of course, you know, the traffic between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem can be quite heavy at times. And of course, it was nearing peak hour traffic, and he was there and he was going to be addressing the Knesset late afternoon, and he left his hotel and he was there in the entourage, and he had the full police escorts and he had everything there, and he's watching his watch, and he needed to be there by 4:30 to speak by 5 o'clock, and they started to get on the freeway and the traffic was getting worse and worse and worse, and he's watching his clock, and he said, and they were going quite fast on the freeway, but of course they didn't want to take any risks because they had the Pope. So he finally says to the driver, he says, you have to stop the entourage, pull over. So what do? They pull over, and he convinces the driver, he says, you know what, I'm the Pope. I can do what I want. God is my protection. I'm going to drive. So he gets in the front seat and he zooms and he loses the entourage, and he's on the freeway and he's going as fast as he can possibly do, and the sirens come on, woo, 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 and he gets pulled over. And they look at him and they say, who are you? And he says, well, I'm the Pope. And they say, how can you be the Pope? He says, well, I am. If you don't believe me, call it in. So they call it in. And they say, excuse me, Your Eminence, you know, this is all, of course, done very professionally, Your Eminence. And it's like, how come you're the driver? He says, well, if I'm the driver, can you imagine how important the guy in the back seat is? Story number 1. Story number 2 goes back to the old country. And of course, so the guy is driving, the stagecoach driver, this is horse and cart carriage days, and the guy is being hired to take the Rebbe from Chelm to Vilna. And he says, Rebbe, I'll get you there safely, don't worry. He says, oh, no, it's okay, take your time, it's not a hassle. But I want you to know that, you know, you'll be there safe and you'll be there in good time. Oh, it's not a problem when we get there. He says, oh, but don't worry, I'll make sure that they look after. The Rebbe says to the driver, don't worry, when we get there, I'll make sure that they take care of you. He says, oh, but Rebbe, they never look after me. They never take care of the stagecoach driver. He says, I will tell you what. He says, just before we get there, why don't we swap places? Have you heard this one? Oh, good. Why don't we swap places? Okay, we'll swap places. So they're getting nearer to the town. It's getting darker and darker, so they pull up the horse and the carriage behind a tree. And I just thought of the image of a horse and cart, you know, carriage behind a tree. That's what made me laugh. And they swap places. And they pull in, and of course, you know, the horse, we'll call him the Rebbe, gets out, and he's like, oh, Rabbi, it's so good to see you. Let's take you inside and give you food and give you drink, and we'll take care of you. And he's sitting down there, and of course, the stagecoach driver, the real Rebbe, is left out for dust. And they say, oh, Rabbi, it's so lovely to have you here. We've got this halachic question our town has been dealing with for 200 years. Can you please answer it for us? And so the Rebbe is like, oh my God. And he goes, okay, so what is it? And he said, so finally they pose the question, and he looks at them and he says, you guys, 200 years you've been pondering this question? 200 years? It's such a simple answer. Even my carriage driver can answer it. So why do I raise these two stories about leadership, but particularly the second one? It's, for me, in relation to this week's Torah portion, Korach. What happens in the parasha of Korach? It's rebellion. It's Korach and his guys who rebel against Moses. They rebel against Moses' right and Moses' leadership and Aaron's leadership and right to power and authority. And the reality is that people can take leadership, or they are appointed to leadership by the people. We understand how the Pope gets appointed to leadership. It's this secret enclave, and we wait for black smoke. We wait black smoke until white smoke comes up. And he's elected by a group of his, and it is his peers. And he takes on this role, and of course they don't want to elect somebody who's too young. So it's this fine balance, and one hopes that the Pope will act in a certain way, and in a sense the priest is there and the Pope is there as Aaron, to take on the role that Aaron and essentially and all of the priests held in ancient times. Now if the Pope is challenged in leadership, the ground isn't going to open up and swallow them all. They're not going to be struck down by lightning. But when you have a situation with the rabbi, and who says to the stagecoach driver, let's swap places. It's a different kind of leadership, is it not? And he's basically saying, what? Judith? Yeah. Yeah. But I think he was also there. Anybody can leave, but I think it was more of a lesson to the townsfolk as well as to the townsfolk, to say, anybody, don't judge people by who arrives in the carriage. The rabbi could be anybody. The rabbi could have been the stagecoach driver. Now, it's just a story. It's just a story. But I think that some people, the rabbi is there to, and this is about leadership. This is not about me. Please don't think this is a story about me as the rabbi. It's really not. It's about those people who choose to take on authority. I think these are stories about humility. These age-old stories are about, is what stories are meant to do. They're there to allow us to look at stories, and at each moment we can take what we want from them. Can we not? I don't think any particular story will give us one message. What do you think? You're looking at me as if I've gone mad. I think, so in terms of, with Korah, getting us back to Korah, they were greedy for power. I don't think the Pope, I hope, is greedy for power. I don't think Moses was greedy for power. I don't think the rabbi was greedy for power. These are not those kinds of stories. But each of those stories are unique about leadership. And I think they can, while one rabbi used it for the story of Bahalotacha, about Moses, I'm using these stories for these two stories particular about a different kind of leadership and humility. They can be used for all kinds of ideas on leadership. So here we now have two humorous stories to take for your dinner parties, to sit around your, maybe not dinner parties, coffees with friends, or to your medical practice. Shabbat Shalom. Now, maybe it didn't quite work as I had hoped, but it worked better in my head. Shabbat Shalom. Let us rise for Aleinu on page 586. Peter and Hilary, would you like to open the ark for us?
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושרינת עוזו בגופי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושרינת עוזו בגופי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, השמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Yeah. And so we turn to the week of Shiva and Shloshim and Yahrzeit, as we think of, for Shloshim, Doris Markison and Jeff White and Sadie Weiner. And for the Yahrzeit, for this Shabbat, we think of Jeanette Sheldon, mother of George Sheldon, Yonatan Kramaletsky, father of Rian, Tilly Lyons, mother of Roy, Leslie Joy Mayer Barton, grandmother of Hannah Mayer Anderson, Nathan Lowenstein, nephew of Joanne Chenik, Shoshana Bat Ezra Barazani, mother of Galit Bailey, Neville Pack, past president of this congregation, and is specifically remembered by Andrew and Gwen Carver, Katie Mendelson, grandmother of Judith Arkwright, and Maury Ehrlich, father of Miriam Landau.
If anyone else would like to remember a loved one for Shiva, for Shloshim, or for Yahrzeit. Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may the memory of the righteous be for a blessing. As we stand together with one voice in solidarity, supporting one another in love and in memory, as we turn to the Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish, on page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, v'yama divrach chiritei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon v'yomechon, v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv v'meru, Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevarach L'olam Alamei Almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, Yitada v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei D'Kudasha B'reichu, Le'olam min kol berchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, da'amiran b'yama v'yimaru.
Amen.
Yehei Shlama Rabba min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, uyaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, Amen. Hamakom yinechem echem b'toch sha'ah havlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved in Zion and Jerusalem and around the world. And let us say, Amen. Just a couple of announcements, just to make note of. We may be seated, yes. TDRS tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, 10:30 services, and then on Monday is Mahjong Monday. I call it Mahjong Monday. Tuesday, I know we have a board meeting on Tuesday night. Then
Wednesday must be Israeli dancing.
Wednesday's Israeli dancing and IT, and definitely ITJ. There will be Yiddish club on Tuesday, I know that. I think there is, yes, there is Yiddish club. There's Torah Tea and Text on Thursday. On Friday is Jeff White's funeral. I don't know if you saw that in the announcements that went out. And Sunday, we have the consecration for Ken Arkwright at 10 o'clock. Judith, our hearts are with you, and Kevin and Peter and your whole family. That's at Karakata. I think those are the main things that our community are a part of this, commemorating and as well as learning. I think those. There's also the quiz night. I don't want to make special mention of the quiz night that is happening on Saturday, the 29th of July. And it's not for a while, but please book tables. Our final song is on page 647, Oziva Zimrat Ya, and then please come and join us outside for Kiddush.
Ozi v'zimrat ya, vayeli leshua. Ozi v'zimrat ya, vayeli leshua. Ozi v'zimrat ya,
Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and thank you for joining us.